Good morning and welcome to the weekly review on Teachers Talk Radio. It's the show where we review the week in education. And joining me today, we have Brent Poland, John Gibbs and Hannah Wilson. We've got quite a few stories to get our teeth into today, so let's start straight away. Teachers in Wales striking over violence in the classroom have given a school a list of pupils they refuse to teach. Staff at Caldecott School in Monmouthshire have held 3 days of action over a matter since September. They claim the school has failed to address long-standing concerns over physical and verbal abuse from pupils. In September, 85% of the school's NASUWT members voted to take strike action, with 92% supporting action short of a strike, including the refusal to teach pupils deemed as posing a risk to staff. The NASUWT confirmed that it had told the school there are named pupils its members were refusing to teach. The NEU also took part in strike action at the school. Earlier strike days planned for October had been called off following positive developments, including a new behaviour policy utilising the advice of the two unions. However, the council confirmed that the situation has deteriorated since then, with a second strike planned for the 15th of November. And Monmouthshire County Council confirmed that the school's head teacher, Stephen Gretsch, is not currently in school, but did not provide a further explanation. I'm going to start with Brent on this as our resident union individual. Do you support these strikes, and are teachers justified in refusing to teach named pupils?
Yes to both, but only after we've seen an escalation. You wouldn't go straight to this. This is obviously escalated to a situation where people feel they've got no other choice. The school haven't dealt with it. Parents obviously haven't dealt with it. The local authority haven't dealt with it. And every single employee, every single teacher, teaching assistant, every person that works in the school has the right to a safe workplace. Every single person in this country has a right to a safe workplace. So why is schools different? We put ourselves on the line. We have a situation where we're constantly in danger, and we are dealing with more challenging pupils in the last couple of years. And the attacks on teachers are increasing. So we have every right to decide what we deem to be safe, provided that due diligence has been done and that this is not straight where we don't like this child, we're not going to teach them. That's not acceptable, where you pick and choose which children you teach. No, this has escalated reading between what has happened over months and months to the stage where those teachers are saying they do not feel safe, and you should be feeling safe in your workplace. Simple as that. And if you're not, you've got to take action, because we have a recruitment and retention crisis because of issues like this not being dealt with, and people are walking out of the classroom because they don't feel safe.
And we will be delving into that recruitment and retention crisis later on in the show. It's interesting what you say about behaviour, and there's this whole sort of thing that, all teachers say that behaviour is getting worse all the time. Actually, when we look at some of the Teacher Tapp latest statistics, we see that there are actually far more teachers now compared to pre-COVID saying that behaviour is getting worse in their schools. So there has been a shift on that. Now, Councillor in Monmouthshire, Paul Pavia, said that he was disturbed to read that teachers had submitted a pupil blacklist to the school, calling it quite extraordinary and against ethical and professional practice. John, do you agree?
Well, it is an extreme thing to do, and it does sound like it'll catch headlines. I mean, blacklist and so on, and parents might be alarmed by the sound of it. But I agree with Brent. The teachers don't do things like this unless something very, very serious is happening. And a lot of the time, far more than blacklists, far more than complaints, teachers put up with it. They take it daily, partly because of the pressure on schools and on them to get on with it, and partly because of a fear that if you complain about students, then it becomes your problem. So teachers find themselves caught in the middle between management that often won't acknowledge these problems, and a society really that doesn't want to acknowledge these problems. We don't like to think there's more. As you say, kids have always been difficult, I'm sure when I was at school, people say, I remember things going wrong and such like, and we all ragged the teacher horribly and such like, but something very serious is happening. I think violence in schools is a greater problem these days. And it's something we shouldn't turn a blind eye to, or try to blame the teachers. And when we get onto one of our stories later today, we'll see that I think this is a problem when it becomes a problem for teachers. So you can twist this around, teachers overreacting, blacklists sound extreme. The problem, I think, is that teachers are caught between school systems which have been dysfunctional for years, been marketized, been neoliberalized, and students who are put under increasing pressure. In schools, they no longer, a proportion of them no longer enjoy being at and have a sense of increasing failure at. And the only object of that ire is the teacher in front of them. And it's a social issue that is not going to go away and needs drawing attention to.
Mm-hmm. Now, so one parent, Anna, said that students shouldn't have to go to school and feel something happened to them or something could happen in the classroom, and it's undermining the authority of teachers when they are there to teach. They're not there to be hassled, and whatever else is going on to them in the school is not right in this day and age. So you've got a parent there who is supporting the strike action. As Brent said, this has been going on since 2019 in terms of the dispute. Hannah, parents are backing the school and the teachers are acting in the best interests of students, I believe. What are your views on this dispute?
I was going to say it's the other kids that it's affecting in the class, because if the teachers aren't able to do their job properly, it's disadvantaging far more than the couple of kids that aren't behaving properly. And I think we all have a right to be safe in the classroom, and if there's violence, that's another level, because if they would go and do that in public, then they'd be arrested, but we're as teachers just expected to take it and be assaulted. And it does seem to be that it is on the rise, and it is potentially, from what I've seen, tends to be the kids from the disadvantaged backgrounds that haven't had the best home life, so therefore they're further behind in school because of COVID. They're struggling to access the learning, so therefore they're acting out. But also we're really behind in the support that in terms of mental health. Like my sister's a Senko, and she regularly gets attacked, and one of the students who finally had been waiting years to get CAMS help told them to, not very politely, to F off, and then they said they'd stop working with them, and that the school's responsibility to work with them. So it's like these students aren't getting the help outside of school either to support them in terms of their behaviour and what is acceptable. And so therefore I completely understand why these teachers are kind of like, I don't want to be attacked, and I want to just teach and do my job properly and support the kids that want to be there and want to learn. And it seems to be that it's down to the teachers to be everybody to these students, and we can't.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Hannah. I'm sure this story will continue to go on. I'm sure we'll see what the outcome of this strike action is. We'd seen that there had been conciliation talks which had taken place, but it's broken down now. So I'm sure we'll return back to this story in the future. Now, this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324, that's JCTTR2324, for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading. It's time to move on to our second story of the day. School leaders' unions have accused Education Secretary Gillian Keegan of inflaming controversy around sex education and unfairly criticising schools. In a letter to Keegan, the General Secretaries of the NAHT and ASCL told her that it was desperately disappointing that she had chosen to denigrate schools in pursuit of a headline. Earlier this week, the DFE issued a press release about correspondence being sent to schools, making it clear that they should provide parents with access to relationships, sex and health education curriculum materials. Keegan said that the government was acting to guarantee parents' fundamental right to know what their children are being taught. However, Paul Whiteman and Jeff Barton, the General Secretaries of NAHT and ASCL respectively, said they believe the vast majority of schools share our SHE materials with parents, with only a very small number of possible cases of that not happening. Schools are still awaiting updated RSHE guidance, which the government has said will go out for full public consultation later this year. Now, John, if I can start with you on this one, is Gillian Keegan inflaming controversy? Does she have a point?
Inflaming controversy. Well, last week, I think I may have observed that where we are in the political arc is where we are going to see a lot of this. Watch the King's speech in a few weeks' time, whenever it is coming up. The King's speech is going to be full of bills that won't ever be expected to see the light of day. They'll be populist. They'll be playing on the fears and anxieties of Middle England. There'll be something about them will be an attempt to win votes in the next election. So Flamey, absolutely, is yet another example of setting up something which isn't a problem, but is perceived, can be perceived by some to be a problem. I don't know why. I mean, I've had a thought about this earlier as to why it is that you can set teachers up as being up to something in the classroom. So where there would be teachers who are presenting students with material that's inappropriate, well, it's baffling to imagine. Or that where they would deny parents access to the material that's being used on their kids. Again, absolutely baffling to imagine where this is taking place. It's a non-problem that's being dealt with for political purposes. And we expect them, they'll be mining every vein of prejudice and fear over the next few months to promote their possibilities of not losing the next election, basically. And I was thinking of where does this idea, this kind of prejudice about teachers, it goes back to the idea of them being the blob, being up to something, teachers being rather lefty, and yet none of it is anything but a spectral fear conjured up by a failing government.
Thank you for that insight, John. If I go to Hannah next, Gillian Keegan says, but the parents have a fundamental right to know what their children are being taught. Does this necessitate this huge onslaught on RSHE materials, or is providing a curriculum map and possibly a sequence of lessons enough?
I think that's the thing. We already tell them what we're doing. We already give an overview. Like, we put it in our parent bulletin that goes home, and pre-warn them what topics are going to come up and where they can get kind of information to just have those conversations with their children. I think it's just in terms of, especially the kind of the order of it. Surely we should have kind of the government's guidance on how it's being reformed before we then kind of have to announce what we're doing. Because otherwise, it's adding to workload as well. The fact that they're going to have to declare every single lesson that they're teaching, and then we're going to get this guidance. It's all going to change, and then we're going to have to declare it all again. I just think it's kind of adding workload, and it's adding to this whole mistrust of teachers. I don't know, it always seems to be this underlining thing that, what are you doing with our children in school? And we're not doing it correctly. But actually, like all people that teach, just their hearts are in the right place and they want the best for the children. And we're trying to educate them and give them the best kind of opportunity to learn. We're not trying to be deceptive and teach them and recruit them into like mini politicians to go down one side. Like, we're kind of giving them a clear view and giving them all the facts in the most professional way possible. And we need to be trusted with that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Hannah. Now, if I can finish off with Brent. Why do you think the DFE, I mean, this is a scary question because I might not be able to stop you talking. Why do you think the DFE is so obsessed with sex education when it actually forms only a very tiny part of RSHE? And why do you think there is this huge DFE focus on this particular issue? And do you think it has any weight?
No way. I coordinated sex education in a Catholic school between 2005 and 2011. I have no fear of it. I involved my parents. I involved all stakeholders. It stinks to me of the, if you tolerate this, then your children will be next kind of mantra. This fear mongering, as if we're some sort of nebulous organization who's got, influence their children in ways and wokeify them. Whoa, the woke. It's nonsense. It's just absolute pure nonsense. And it doesn't bear fruit with evidence, because I like evidence. Parents saw what lessons we taught during COVID. There were some parents sitting in the back of my classroom, i.e. on the laptop, listening to exactly what I delivered to children. I don't think as teachers we've ever been as transparent as we are now, especially with digital technology. I don't know how many times I send lessons home, or lesson materials, or demands for lesson materials. Parents can, and they have the right, don't get me wrong. My dentist tells me, what he's about to do to my teeth. I don't question my dentist about what he's about to do to my teeth, but he has the good graces to turn around and say he's going to have to do a root canal, and he shows me what he's going to do. Now, if he goes, a doctor tells me what he's going to do, I trust him. But this constant drip feeding of we can't trust the teachers and stuff with our children either trust us with your children or don't trust us with your children. If they don't trust with their children, then I'm sorry, that's a sad indicative of the psychology and the fear-mongering and the paranoia. I mean, this is the same Department of Education who's currently monitoring people. Hello again, hi, and I'm waiting for my Freedom of Information request. Such a culture of Orwellianism, because here's the thing about it. We're teachers, we're critical people, we think for ourselves, and I want my children to think for myself. And that's not going to turn around and say that I'm going to influence children I see once a week for 1 hour to become some sort of, critical thinking person and dangerous. But there's a reason why dystopian societies go after critical thinkers and educators, because we invoke within our children this thinking. And maybe if these children sometimes think for themselves, then congratulations, they're going to be a generation of people that actually go and do stuff. That's what we're there to do. So they're actually trying to contradict us, because we want the children to think for themselves, give them the whole information. But this is just pure fear mongering and some sort of deep South, Americans kind of culture war wokeism stuff you're seeing over there that just copies that. And it's politically motivated. It's got no evidence, no basis of evidence whatsoever. And you were correct about one thing. You just let me keep talking.
What was I going to say? I was going to say, if you have any thoughts, if you have any thoughts about what Brent, John, and Hannah have been saying today, then you can, of course, interact with the show, whether you're listening live on YouTube, on Twitter /X, LinkedIn, or Facebook, or you're listening back on demand. You can tweet us, message us at TT Radio Official. You can comment on our live YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook streams, and we'll be able to beam your comments into our studio to discuss them as well. So a very warm welcome to our live listeners today. And of course, if you'd like to host with Teachers Talk Radio, we do have some spaces available. So whether you're coming to the end of your half term, starting your half term, or you're like me, you're halfway through your 2-week half term, or if like John, you're permanently on half term, then you can get in contact with us. Our email address is info@ttradio.org, or you can drop us a message on our contact form, ttradio.org/contact. Time to move on to our final story of the day. I think this is my favourite story of the day. Actors in London are being offered as little as £77 a day in London to work as teaching assistants in schools, in a move the support staff union GMB describes as funny if it wasn't so tragic. An advert from recruitment agency Teaching Personnel said actors could build a strong rapport within classrooms, while another pointed to opportunities to support a school's drama department. Experience working with the children was a bonus, as was confidence and a positive can-do attitude. The move comes amid a retention crisis for support staff in schools, with many leaving the classroom to get better paid jobs in retail and hospitality. The National Foundation for Educational Research found last month that more than 7 in 10 senior leaders reported TAs leaving their school because they could earn more elsewhere. And nearly half of secondary school leaders reported low salaries were the single biggest barrier to recruiting TAs. Mike Short, head of education at Unison, which supports support staff, said that sparse funding forced schools to rely heavily on supply workers, described as a good quick fix, but hugely expensive. And according to LinkedIn, 14 applications were submitted in 2 days. If I could start with Hannah on this one, is it comedy or is it tragedy?
Well, ironically, I was talking about this on my show about kind of our non-core subjects, more important than core subjects, where I had my friend Liam on, who is he's an actor / he's a screenwriter and director, but he TAs on the side in an alternative provision. So he gets quite a rough ride, but actually he's great with the kids, and his ability to adapt and change personas and kind of perform does make him really good with the kids and seem to make a really positive effect. But he does that on the side so he can spend his other time filming and finishing off his film, which he's hopefully finished this week, but he's got a year then to edit it. So I can understand the kind of the lure of that kind of person to dip in and out, and kind of that ability to kind of have that option to say yes or no in terms of supply, and why they would be good at it. But it just feels like it's kind of the wrong way to recruit people. Like, surely we should be recruiting people that want to go into education and want to make a difference and want to learn and make a difference in these children's lives. And also it seems like quite a lot of money to spend on kind of supply, and that seems to be a bigger issue across teaching in general, that we're spending all this money on recruiting and trying to get people in, rather than kind of training and retaining the teachers that we do have.
Now, of course, the actors are being paid £77 a day. I wonder how much more is going to those agencies. And it's worth noting that none of the agencies involved in this have commented to media about this. Now, John, doesn't this just show that teaching is all about performance? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it does. It does, absolutely. I don't think there's a teacher who won't recognise that they have a teacherly persona. They have certain tricks of the trade, that they are, in some senses, actors. But I'd love to think that this was a very positive thing. That the government said, well, actors, they'd be ideal in the classroom, wouldn't they? For all the reasons Hannah just said. They are confident, they can put on personas, they can go into role, they can do all sorts of things of that kind. Wonderful. Wouldn't actors? This isn't that kind of thing at all. This was some desperate pause as the flip chart was blank under the heading of who can we get to replace people in the classroom without paying them more? And they came up with, well, who are the desperate in our society? Let's find the people who are really, well, actors. They're always desperate for anything. You've seen them working McDonald's or serving lunch in places in the motorway. Actors are the ideal people to get in the classroom because of their desperation, not because of their skills. And that is why it's comic and rather sad in that respect. So I think they should mine other avenues of our society for the desperate. I mean, there's going to be an awful lot of Conservative MPs who'll be looking around to do a job soon. So they get them in the classroom, offer them a role. There
are a few Conservative MPs of all parties who were once teachers. I'm sure Brent could help me, and I'm sure you can all help me with you. Gullis, Brendan Clark-Smith. In the Labour Party, you've got Emma Hardy, you've got Stephanie Peacock, who did teach first, but new MP for Mid-Beds, Alistair Straven, he came through Teach First as well. So you've got quite a few teachers who end up going into politics. I wonder how many of them will go back into teaching. Of course, Jonathan Gullis did say that every Friday he'd work in as a supply teacher in one of the schools in his constituency. I don't believe he has done that. Brent, while we're talking about acting, I'm not going to ask you who's going to play you in your life story film. Any idea? Okay, go for it. Tom Cruise. I mean, look, they're being paid £77 a day in London to work as teaching assistants. John says they're desperate.
Buy you a coffee if you're lucky. Look, the thing is, my best friend works in film production, and at the moment he is trying to find alternative employment because the economic downturn always hits the creative industries first, because they're, in a sense, they're kind of a luxury in that sense. So there is a lot of out-of-work actors, and there is a genre, John's correct, of the out-of-work actor trying to make it big and doing all sorts of gig economy jobs. So they are a group of people who, in some ways, have some skill sets of coming in. But there's a bigger issue here, and it links to what we were saying earlier on. I had a TA for 14 years who worked in my classroom, and she pretty much was as good as a second history teacher. She was worth half a grade. I worked it out. She was worth half a grade for children with particular needs. It took the pressure off me, and also my geography department as well. We shared her with the two subjects. She got to know the subject. She got to know the children. She got to know the parents, and became a fantastic TA. Had a philosophy degree, was highly motivated, and went the extra mile, would stay vocationally and do lots of stuff. Because, we want people like that. But then I have a scenario now where we're losing lots of our I would say baby boomer type individuals who have stayed in education long enough and they're tired. So I've seen a massive clear out of the type of individuals who did teaching assistant jobs because they were invested in the community and invested in being a teaching assistant. Some of them ex-teachers themselves, some who have degrees, and some who absolutely could step in at a moment's notice and actually take over the class for a period of time. And that's the thing with a teaching assistant. The key word there is teaching assistant. And then I looked at my teaching assistants sometimes and say, I've said to some of them, you could step up and be a teacher, and I got told off the sweep by one of them who's fantastic, well overqualified to be a teaching assistant. And she says, no, I've done the classroom. I can't do what you do, but I want to work one-to-one with kids. So people find their niche, and a lot of teaching assistants out there, for me, are unsung heroes. They're not out-of-work actors who are thrown in by an agency, creaming off some profits in a marketized education system. They're people who care. They're people who have chosen to be a teaching assistant first, the same way we've chosen to be a teacher. And that, for me, there's no more value for money in education than a quality teaching assistant, because for what they get paid, to what they deliver, They are, for me, the unsung heroes of our education system. And I think the government just, not only do they devalue us, it just shows you how much they devalue teaching assistants, where they just think we could just throw a body in a room. That's what you want. You just want a body in a room. No, I want a proper teaching assistant who has some degree of understanding of not just working with children, but some of the pedagogy as well, who can understand me as well as a teacher and assist me. I wouldn't have a dental nurse. So I wouldn't put an actor into a dental nurse. I'll go back to my analogy. I wouldn't have an actor going into being a nurse or a hospital helper. You wouldn't do that in any other profession. So why he's going to stick just out of work actors into a school and hope for the best? It's just ridiculous, and it's tragedy. Absolutely. It just, for me, this sums up exactly where we're at, of how they devalue schools. They just think there's a sector of society that's free. Just check him and just whack him in schools. Well, it'll be fine. So that's what I feel about that. I think it's just disgusting. I think it's not funny any longer. I think it's got
undervalued, underappreciated, underpaid. Yeah, I concur. I've got a teaching assistant now in my year 11 class, and it's amazing. And the amount of stuff I can do now, which I couldn't necessarily do when we're in year 10, is amazing, because yes, it is another body in the room, but actually, somebody who's qualified and understands and actually can do the history as well, is massive. Really, really important. It's now time to look at our shows of the week. And to talk through our shows of the week, we'll start with Brent, then Hannah, then John, and then come back round to me. So, Brent, kick us off.
Yeah, I had to love the timing of Darren Lister's yesterday morning, Saturday morning Twilight show, the breakfast early morning show. And that was why do kids and adults love scary stories, and obviously the Halloween special. And really a good in-depth analysis, as always, from Darren on the sort of psychology behind it, and this history behind it as well. And of course, that screams to me. See what they did there? That screams to me as a Celt, because I that's what I grew up with. I grew up with the banshees and the ghosts and the But I love scary stories. So Darren does a really good job on that. That was the Saturday morning show.
Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Hannah, your show of the week.
I'm going for Tom Rogers' Classroom Management 101. So this was on Spaces, and it was really nice because there was quite a lot of people calling in and chatting, and it was one of those where people were saying kind of things that they struggle with, and people were giving different options and things to try. So it's kind of like the best of teaching, like where we all help each other and give each other solutions. And I think especially with the idea that classroom management and behaviour is going downhill, we are having to change and adapt, and it's important that we share that and work as a community and do that together. So worth a listen.
Thank you, Hannah. John, your show of the week.
A week ago, last Sunday, I listened to the Twilight Show with Maud, and she described her visit to Bletchley Park, which is about to host a big conference on artificial intelligence and so on. And I used to live not far from Bletchley Park. I used to go there quite a few times, and watched it go from a place that was in danger of being knocked down as a forgotten piece of history through to steady development, lots of volunteers turning up, and then becoming a really sort of major attraction and so on. So it's great to see Bletchley Park, which is a wonderful place to go. And then Maud's description of it, and she seems to have learned everything about it. It's one of those, she seems to have walked around and absorbed all the history of computing and Bletchley Park in one go and recounted it. So it was a great listen to appreciate. Go and visit Bletchley Park.
Excellent, thank you. And then my show of the week was John B's show on Tuesday night with special guest Ian Timbrell talking about RSHE and EDI in schools, particularly important. And Ian was a really good guest because he was able to delve very knowledgeably, if that's a word, into the issues and actually provide a very well-informed perspective on giving really important advice for teachers on RSHE in particular. Now, with an eye on the time, I can see we've got 20 seconds until we hit 30 minutes. So I want to say a big thank you to Brent, John and Hannah, and a thank you to our listeners on Teachers Talk Radio, and a big thank you to our sponsors, John Catt, as well. And we will see you next week for next week's weekly review.